If you're like me, you probably have high performance computing needs, but not a high performance computing budget. Recently, I felt the need to upgrade my daily driver from a machine I've had here for several years to a machine that better fit the workload that I'm doing currently, which is a lot more video editing and other high performance loads. Since I didn't have the budget to go out and buy a brand new Core i7 Kaby Lake or similar machine with all the new bells and whistles, I decided to do something I've done several times in the past, which is to take a workstation or server class machine from several years back and repurpose it for my needs. This is a great way to get a high performance machine on a budget, but there are some things that you need to keep in mind. I'm going to go through a few things that I've learned over the years that will make this process smoother and hopefully more successful for you. The first step in building a computer like this is to find a suitable donor computer. What you're looking for is something that's available at a low price point, and the way you usually find something like that is to look for a device that is used either by big business or data centers, and that are leased or purchased in large blocks and then turned over after a certain period of time. That means that a large number of these devices hit the used market at the same time, which drives prices down. And it also means that the availability of parts and upgrades for these machines will be available for a certain window of time. And the machine that would be the right choice now is not the same device that would be the right choice a year or two from now, because the used market is volatile and what devices are available on that market change. The device that I based my build on here, as you can see, is an HP Z800 workstation, and I happened to get this machine at a good price from a government surplus. I feel the first thing that you should keep in mind once you've picked a donor computer for your build is to keep the idea of starting low and finishing high in mind. As you can see here, I have my Z800 open. I'm going to look at some of the features of the Z800 and explain what I mean by start low, aim high. Basically, you don't have to build the entire machine in one go. A lot of times with these machines you can start with a lower configuration that will get you by for a certain period of time, and then as you have money you can buy upgrades to get the machine where you want it to be. The Z800 is a pretty modular workstation, and it's designed to be easily serviced. These air covers come off. These are ducts that channel the air where they need to go for cooling. And as you can see inside this device, let me zoom in a little bit. We'll look at the internals here. You can see two CPU coolers. This is a dual processor device. And a lot of the workstation and especially server class machines that you will find are multi-processor. So do you have to start with two processors if your machine didn't come with two? No, you start with one. Do you have to start with the highest spec processor available for this machine? No, you don't. You can start with something a little bit lower spec and buy either through eBay or find through surplus or other sources, find upgrades as you go. Now this computer, when I received it, had two processors in it. They were 5500 series Xeons, low clock speed Xeons. I believe they're 5506s. So they were enough to run the machine until I found exactly what I was looking for. Now the Z800 supports both quad and hex core processors, either in single or dual configuration. Eventually I bought newer but still surplus Xeon 5600 series processors with higher clock speed and better thermals, and upgraded the machine. Now under these fans here near the top we have the memory for this device, for this computer, and you see some of the workstation design here. These are actually cooled by their own fans, which is really kind of nice. This piece lifts out, revealing the RAM slots. Now you see not all the RAM slots are populated. There are 12 RAM slots there, 6 per processor. So another way to start low, aim high, is to start with low capacity memory sticks that you can fill all the slots with, or if you're running one processor, one bank of 6 slots, and then swap those devices out for higher capacity DIMMs as time goes on. That's what I did with this machine. I managed to cobble together enough RAM to get the machine off the ground. I was running it with the 2 processors in it. I think I was running 18 gigs of RAM. And then later on, watching eBay, found a good price on 8 gig DIMMs for this particular machine. Bought 6 of them, and now I'm running 48 gigs of RAM in this machine. So that I believe that will be my final configuration for this. I really don't have much need for that, much more than that at this point. This machine also came with some NVIDIA graphic cards in it. I used those, one of those, for a short period of time until I invested in the graphics card that I wanted in the end, which ended up being NVIDIA GTX 1060. You need to do your research on these devices to make sure that they have the slots for the expansion that you want. This machine happens to have PCI Express 16X slots. Most modern, even server grade machines will have that. And as you can see, the 1060 just fits past that heatsink below this, the second CPU. So that's just a standard Gigabyte GTX 1060 6 gig card, and it runs beautifully in this machine. So when you're building a machine on a budget, you need to keep in mind aiming low and finishing high is a perfectly legitimate way to build a machine. Another thing you should keep in mind as you lay out the build for a machine like this is that workstations and servers are not designed in the same way that your standard desktop is designed. What you want to do when building a machine like this is to look at what you have and play to its strengths. What I mean by that is that these workstations and servers are designed to do certain things well, and you should try to maximize that for your workload. I'll just show you a couple of things about the Z800 that are conducive to building a high performance machine. If you pull this lever down here, this is the power supply, and it slides out. And if you can see, on the Z800 you have an 80 plus silver rated power supply, and I don't know if you can read this, but this is an 1110 watt power supply. That means that you can put a lot of hardware in this box and it will happily run it. I don't know if I can get this back in there with one hand or not. There we go. So one great strength you have there is the power availability on this machine. So what I ended up doing for storage on this machine, instead of buying new hard drives, was I salvaged the drives out of this machine and another machine that I salvaged from surplus and ganged them together. I have a RAID 0 array for quick storage in here, and also a RAID 1 array for more critical storage. Plus I also added an SSD. In my opinion, adding an SSD is the best way to improve performance on any computer, and a workstation like this is no exception. That's where my operating system lives, and most of the applications that are installed on this machine are on the SSD for quick retrieval, and the hard drives are used for primarily just for data storage for video. When I import video onto the machines, I usually use the RAID 0 array for quick reads and writes. And once I have a project done, I move it over to the RAID 1 for archival storage, which works very well. And this machine is set up with, it supports, actually has 2 separate RAID controllers on it. One designed for SATA drives and one designed for SAS drives. Probably with the correct cabling, or maybe with no cabling at all, I could use the SAS controller. But currently I'm just using the SATA controller. So that is the strength of this machine, so I've played to it. The opposing thought there is also true, and that is to understand the limitations of the computer that you're working with. Now, this is a workstation, server grade machine. This was a very expensive machine when it was first new, and it was designed to be very reliable, which is a great thing. However, that means that the memory that this runs is specific to workstations and servers. You can't just throw regular desktop RAM into this machine. It runs DDR3 RAM, but it is ECC RAM. So what that allows the computer to do, because there's an additional chip on each of those DIMMs, is to keep track of memory errors and correct them on the fly, which is great, but you need to keep that in mind when you're purchasing RAM for a machine like this. You need to buy error correcting RAM or it just won't work in this machine. Another thing that you probably can notice just by looking at the motherboard of this machine, this is a non-standard layout. This is not an ATX or even an extended ATX board. This is a board that was designed specifically for the use in the Z800. Also, the power supply is designed specifically for this computer. A lot of the parts in this computer are modular and can be replaced. The RAM, the CPUs. It has standard expansion slots and standard drive cages, so you can use standard drives in it. But you can't move this computer into another case. It's going to live in this case for as long as you have it, which in the case of the Z800 is not bad. It's a pretty decent layout, and the cooling is very good. Cooling is superior to most desktop machines that I've ever owned. The heat sinks are perfectly adequate for what I'm running on them, but the heat sinks have non-standard fan pin configuration, so you can't just slap any old CPU cooler in here. So you need to keep those things in mind, and those kind of things should come up in your research. So if any of those are a hindrance to you building the machine the way you want to, you need to keep that in mind right from the beginning. And sometimes you just need to pass on hardware that doesn't meet your needs. You don't have to jump on the first thing you see. A lot of times scavenging parts from multiple machines is a perfectly legitimate way to build one device. But the Z800 I think looks nice, works well, and I'm perfectly happy with the case that it's in currently, so I have no problem with that. So there's a look at my Z800 workstation build. I hope it inspires those of you who are looking to do a similar build to the best way to approach that process. A couple of things to keep in mind as you look to build a machine like this. A machine like this will not support the latest and greatest technology that is out there. This machine does not support in its current configuration USB 3.0 or Thunderbolt or NVMe. Now, if any of those things are serious considerations in your build, or those type of devices are in your budget, perhaps a budget build is not for you. However, if you do want to build a machine like this on a budget and have access to those features, you can always buy expansion cards and install them in the device as long as the expansion cards are supported. And you can get those technologies on older hardware. I still think, even with those limitations, this is the best way to build a workstation at this time on a budget, especially considering the slowdown in performance increases of Intel processors over the last 10 years or so. A processor that is 7 or 8 years old but at the top of its lineup is going to be quite powerful even compared to modern processors that just came out, especially if you have a device like this that takes 2 processors. So then you're negating the performance gains of the brand new single processors by running 2 that are slightly slower. And in certain workloads like video rendering, having those additional cores will be great, and you'll see increased performance from that. In some other performance benchmarks, for example gaming, where you are often running off of only a couple of the cores that are in even a quad-core device today, it's not going to be as fast. But I do game on this machine. I don't play a lot of AAA titles, but the ones I do play run perfectly fine at 1080p on this device. And I'm perfectly happy with that. So understanding those limitations, as we talked about in the last bit of the video, are crucial to being happy with a build like this. I hope that you have enjoyed watching this video. Hope you've learned something. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments and I'll do what I can to answer them. Thanks.